The Commerce Department's Economic Development Administration has made $184 million in grants to 6 local jurisdictions. They'll carry out plans to improve local economies. With how and why these 6 communities were chosen, we turn to the acting director of the Recompete pilot program, Rachel Sun. Ms. Sun, good to have you with us.
Great. Thanks for having me, Tom.
And just give us the brief background on the Recompete pilot program. These are recompeting for pilots to do what?
So the Recompete program at its core is a program that's designed to invest grant funding into economically distressed communities across the country. Really, the goal here is to tackle this distress with a focus on jobs, right? So of the 6 awardees, we were very excited to announce last month. Really, most of them focus on one of 2 things. So either a strategy to create jobs in communities that either no longer have them or have been historically underinvested in, or to perhaps invest in communities where there are access to good jobs, but certain parts of the community have been left out of that access. So, in those communities, it might be certain barriers that leave people out of the economy, whether that's workforce training, access to wraparound services, things like that. But really at its core, this program is, a jobs program with a focus on places that have been historically left behind across the country.
And the release describes this as finalists, these 6 areas as finalists. So there was a first round in which many more communities got sort of seed funding?
Yep, great question. So maybe just going backwards about a year, I can give a bit of context on the program origin and how we got to this point. But the Recompete program was authorized as part of the 2022 CHIPS and Science Act. So we received authorization for appropriations up to $1 billion. We were very lucky to receive $200 million in appropriations in fiscal 2023, to really pilot this first round of the competition. And so backtracking about a year, we launched the Notice of Funding Opportunity as a 2-phase competition, to your question. So in the first phase, really, we asked applicants to come to us and say, hey, at the highest level, what is the concept for your plan to address economic distress for your community? In that phase, we received 565 applications. So this was the highest subscribed competition we've ever run at the Economic Development Administration, really speaking to the level of demand across the country. That 565 at the end of phase 1 became 22. So we selected 22 finalists. President Biden announced them in December of last year. And those 22 finalists really represented the top 10% of the country in terms of plans that we really believed in, that we thought this is a real strategy to address economic distress, really improve employment in these communities that have been so left behind. So that was phase 1 to phase 2. And then phase 2 to announcement, which is what you just referenced. So the 22 became 6. We were able to award those 6 anywhere from $20 million to $40 million each in grant funding to really then move forward and implement the strategies that they had proposed. And then in parallel, we also awarded over the past year about 24 strategy development grants. So those grants are about $500,000 each, really intended to help teams continue to refine their strategies. As we know, this stuff takes time and we really want to see the work go forward.
And you mentioned the money originally came from the CHIPS and Science Act. Are these grants, do they have anything to do with semiconductor production or manufacturing in any way, what the strategies are?
Totally. Great question. So, it was authorized through the CHIPS and Science Act, but the specific activities of focus for Recompete aren't as related to direct semiconductor investments. Really, the activities that we're funding are within the spectrum of what EDA would generally fund, and we're quite flexible on that. So we're funding anything from workforce training programs to small business supports to building infrastructure to coordination and governance dollars within these communities. But I do want to take a step back and put it in context of why it was authorized through CHIPS, right? And so while Recompete is a program focused on distressed communities, we know broadly that here at the EDA, our mission is to prepare American regions for competitiveness on the global stage and to be, really competitive and secure in this global economy. And so Recompete's role within that is we know that it's impossible to do this while we know that many parts of the country continue to be left behind. And so through programs like Recompete, we can bring those, left behind communities and really invest in them so that they can achieve economies that work for both their local residents, but also thrive within the global economy.
We are speaking with Rachel Sun. She's acting director of the Recompete pilot program, part of the Commerce Department's Economic Development Administration. And just 2 of the areas that I know a little bit about, Allentown, Pennsylvania, and Birmingham, Alabama. Those are places that used to be wealthy in the metalworking and metal processing, steel, and so on, which has mostly fled almost all of the United States. So just describe for us briefly those 2 areas. What did they do and what will they be doing with this grant money?
Yeah, totally. Thanks for bringing this up, Tom. So on Allentown, exactly, speaking to what you just mentioned, what we're seeing in the Allentown community and more broadly within the Lehigh Valley region is a resurgence in manufacturing. So as you said, historically steel focused, historically industrial, now seeing actually growth in manufacturing sectors above the national average. And so, that's kind of what the team said to us. Hey, we're seeing all this regional growth, but there are three specific neighborhoods within the city of Allentown that have not really been seeing the benefits of those growth. And so we see residents there, about 70% of the community there is Hispanic or Latino, where we actually do see really high prime age unemployment. And so we see poverty rates at about 34% in those communities. We see that the number of working age adults in those communities significantly lags the national average rate. And so they said, hey, we're really going to take this opportunity to zone in, take a highly targeted approach, and propose a plan that really gets residents in those communities to those good jobs that are in the surrounding region. So to speak a bit more to that, we just awarded them $20 million to implement a series of 8 different projects. Those projects fall into a couple categories. So they have a workforce development training program that's intended to reach those residents. They have some work focused on childcare, right? We know across the board that childcare continues to be a barrier for residents to access good jobs and even participate in training. So part of the funding will be to bridge those gaps and also to increase the supply of childcare in that community. Another bucket of funding for them will go towards improving transportation access. So how are you expected to continue to retain a job or retain training without affordable, easy transportation to those locations? And then the last piece is focused on continuing to invest in local manufacturing, continue to invest in the infrastructure needed to bring small businesses and jobs into the community. And so we're really excited about this program because, as you can tell, we have a pretty broad funding remit to give flexible funding towards communities in a locally driven way. And that's what we're seeing happening in Allentown, and excited to kick off that grant over the next few months.
And by the way, what do they make now in the Lehigh Valley? Do we have any sense of what's driving that manufacturing resurgence?
It's a great question. So I think there's a long tradition in the Lehigh Valley, and especially we were just in Allentown last Monday of doing high customization, low volume manufacturing. So the strategy really isn't to choose a specific sector per se, but you have all of these manufacturing business owners who are able to say, hey, we can take you end to end on a product development and really be able to customize this product. So it really varies across the spectrum, anything from, water sanitation products to thinking about industrial manufacturing to other sectors. But really their specialty is being able to customize to the degree possible.
So it's not motors for electric cars, for example, quite yet.
Multiple sectors, but yes, focusing on quite a few.
And what about Birmingham?
Yeah, totally. So in Birmingham, this is also one of our plays where you see that the strategy is there are actually quite a lot of good jobs, but again, people really can't get to those jobs. So they're focused on 4 neighborhoods on the northwestern side of Birmingham. And these are 4 neighborhoods that have been historically redlined, predominantly Black, have seen the effects of multiple decades of disinvestment, right? And so really in Birmingham, there's a focus here on employer commitments that we saw above and beyond in the competition. This team was able to bring in employer commitments of nearly 4,000 plus jobs, where over the course of the year that they participated in this competition, the team went around to the Coca-Cola bottling company, they went around to the local pipe fitting company, to the local Birmingham utility company and say, hey, we are applying for federal funding up to $20 to $50 million. And what we'd like to do is ask you to say, hey, if we get this funding, will you commit to hiring residents from these communities, even though we know that, there's some cost to you. And so they were actually able to secure, again, 4,000 plus commitments to hire from these companies, which is really exciting. And then similarly, our funding is